I'm Mary, and this is not just a story, it's the moment my whole life turned upside down because of one small decision I made on the side of a road. And no, I'm not exaggerating, I was on my way to have dinner with the parents of my fiancé, and trust me when I say they are not just rich, they're absurdly rich, the kind of rich that makes you feel poor just by breathing the same air as them. And that night was supposed to be perfect. I had picked the right dress. I practiced my smile in the mirror like 10 times. I made sure I wouldn't be late because Andrew, my fiancé, said very clearly, Mary, my mom will judge you from the second you step in the house, so don't be late. And you know what I wasn't going to be. I planned everything. I left early. I checked the GPS twice. But even with everything perfect, I still ended up screwing it all up, but not because I was careless or because I wanted to. What happened is that on my way there I saw an old woman standing alone next to a broken car. She looked lost, tired, and completely abandoned, like the world had forgotten she existed. And right there in that second I had to choose, should I stop and help her, or should I keep going and pretend I didn't see anything? And listen, I'm not gonna lie, I hesitated, I really did, because my head was screaming, don't do it, don't ruin this night, but my heart said something else. And in the end I listened to my heart, and I stopped, I helped her. And because of that I was late, and because of that everything got out of control. But that's not even the craziest part. The real twist came later, when I found out that this woman, this old fragile lady that I helped, was actually someone much more important than I ever imagined. And no, I'm not saying that as a metaphor or exaggeration. She literally changed the entire direction of my life. And I wouldn't be here today if I had just driven past her like everybody else did. And if you think I'm making this up, you should really stick around, because this story gets deeper and deeper, and you won't believe what she told me right before leaving my car. I promise you won't see it coming. So before I continue, do me a quick favor, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We're trying to hit our goal this month, and I'd love to have you as part of our community. And hey, if you've ever had a moment in your life where one small choice changed everything, tell me in the comments below. I read everything. And now let me take you back to where it all started. My name is Mary, I'm 26 years old, and I've never really been part of the world that Andrew comes from. While he grew up coming home to chandeliers, private chefs, and ski trips to Switzerland, I was raised by a single mom who worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. And maybe that's why when we met it felt like something out of a movie. He wasn't arrogant or spoiled like I imagined rich guys would be. He was kind, curious, and weirdly obsessed with the way I laugh. We met at a bookstore, believe it or not, and it all happened so naturally. We clicked, we talked for hours, we started dating, and somehow he fell in love with me, and I fell in love with him. And then came the question, the one I was both waiting for and secretly dreading, when he asked me to meet his family, and not just a quick hello. He invited me to a formal dinner in their mansion with his parents, his 2 sisters, and even their private lawyer, because apparently when you're that rich, everything has to be official and fancy and organized. And honestly, I was terrified. I didn't know which fork to use at a fancy dinner, or what to wear, or how to talk like them, or what kind of wine you're supposed to drink with fish. So I did what anyone would do. I Googled, I watched etiquette videos, I even practiced sitting up straight in front of the mirror for a week, because I didn't want them to look at me and think, oh, she's not one of us. And trust me, Andrew did his best to calm me down. He kept saying, don't worry, they'll love you, just be yourself. But let's be real, people like them don't exactly roll out the red carpet for girls like me. And what made it worse is that Andrew told me his mom was very particular about punctuality. She's the kind of woman who notices if your shoes aren't polished or if your lipstick is 1 shade off. And he told me something I'll never forget. He said, Mary, this dinner is important because if my mom doesn't approve, things might get complicated. And I nodded, I smiled, but deep down I felt like I was going into an exam that I wasn't prepared for. So I planned everything to perfection. I bought a new dress, I did my nails, I left early, I double-checked the traffic, I even skipped lunch because I didn't want anything to ruin my appetite or my mood. This was my chance to prove to them that I belonged by Andrew's side, that I wasn't just some girl he picked up on a whim. I wanted to show them that I was smart, responsible, polite, and most of all worthy of their son's love. And maybe, just maybe, if that dinner went well, it would be the beginning of something beautiful, a family, a future, something that I never had growing up. Because when I imagined my life before Andrew, it was never full of grand things. I never dreamed of mansions or vacations or private jets. I just wanted to be safe, to be loved, to be accepted. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had that in my hands. But life has a way of testing us at the worst possible moment, and I didn't know it yet, but that night was going to be one of those moments when the universe decides to throw a curveball right in the middle of your perfect little plan. And now looking back, I realized that every second leading up to that night was preparing me for one decision. The moment I saw that old woman on the side of the road, I could have kept driving, I could have arrived on time, I could have smiled and shaken hands and played the perfect polite guest, and maybe things would have gone fine. Maybe not, but none of that happened because I made a different choice and everything changed. And it all started with that perfectly planned evening slowly falling apart before my eyes. I was driving down the road, music playing soft in the background, trying to calm myself down, going over every detail of the dinner in my head like a checklist: dress perfect, hair done, makeup light, but classy, shoes clean, phone charged, GPS on. I was 25 minutes ahead of time. I thought nothing could go wrong until I saw her standing there alone by the side of the road, next to an old dusty car with a hood popped open and smoke, or maybe it was steam, coming out. She looked confused, small, kind of fragile, with gray curly hair and a big brown coat that didn't match the weather at all. It wasn't even cold, and there she was, waving slowly at cars that just kept speeding past her. No one even slowed down. I did what everyone else did at first. I drove right past her. I looked at the clock. I had time, but not that much time, and I told myself, it's not my problem. Someone else will stop, someone better prepared, someone who's not heading to a critical family dinner with people who already think she's not good enough. But something in my chest just wouldn't let it go. My hands were still gripping the wheel, my eyes locked on the rearview mirror, watching her get smaller and smaller until I couldn't take it anymore, and I hit the brakes, pulled over, and reversed all the way back to where she was. I rolled down the window and said, "Hey, are you okay?" She looked at me with eyes that were soft and kind and a little surprised, and said, "Oh dear, I think my car just gave up on me. I was on my way to visit someone, but I guess that's not happening anymore, and my phone died too. Silly me, I left the charger at home." I nodded, smiled a little, and said, "Maybe I can help. I don't know much about engines, but I've seen my uncle fix a car or two." She chuckled and said, "Oh, that would be so kind of you." I parked, got out, and walked toward the engine, which smelled weird and looked like a puzzle made for geniuses, but I pretended I knew what I was doing. I jiggled a few wires, tightened a cap that was already tight, and told her to try turning the key. She did, and of course nothing happened. The car just clicked and stayed silent. I tried not to panic. I pulled out my phone and checked for signal. Nothing. I looked around, just endless road, trees, and the occasional blur of cars that didn't care. I told her, "Look, I'm gonna try again. Okay, maybe it's just a loose connection." I bent down again, fiddled with something random, and this time when she turned the key, the engine made a noise, and then another, and then finally started coughing to life like it had been asleep for 100 years. She looked at me with a smile so wide it made her eyes water. "You're an angel," she said. "You really are." I laughed and told her I was just lucky with buttons. We both laughed, and I thought, okay, that's it, I'll get to the dinner just a little late, nothing terrible. She reached into her purse, pulled out a small, old-looking card, and said, "Listen, this might sound odd, but would you mind dropping me off at this address? It's just a few minutes away. I don't trust this car to make it any further, and I don't want to break down again in the middle of nowhere." I hesitated just for a second because every minute was counting now. I was already late, and I could feel the dinner slipping away from me, but her face was so honest, so gentle, and something about her reminded me of my grandma, the way she used to look at me when I was 5 and scared of the dark. So I nodded. I said, "Sure, get in," and she did, slowly, carefully settling into the passenger seat. She thanked me again twice, and we started driving. Her directions were simple: just straight, then left, then one more right. And as we got closer, the houses started changing. No more simple one-floor homes or quiet driveways. We were entering a neighborhood where the trees looked trimmed by hand, and every house had gates, statues, water fountains. I started getting nervous again. I checked the clock. I was 38 minutes late now, and counting, but the old lady looked so calm, staring out the window, humming a tune I didn't recognize, and then she said something that made my stomach flip. "You know, Mary, you have a good heart." I didn't remember telling her my name. I froze for a second, smiled awkwardly, and said, "How do you know my name?" She said, "Oh, it's written all over you," and gave a soft laugh like it was nothing. I didn't ask again, but something felt off. Finally, she pointed to a giant white house with golden numbers by the gate, and said, "This is me." I stopped in front, and before getting out, she looked at me and said something I'll never forget. She said, "Mary, thank you for stopping today. Not many would have, but you did, and that means something." I just smiled and said, "No problem, happy to help." She opened the door slowly, got out, looked back once more, and added, "Oh, and Mary, you passed the test." I blinked, confused. What test? I asked, but she just smiled again like I'd asked a silly question, and then walked through the gate like she belonged there, like she'd lived there forever. I sat in the car stunned, and then I looked at the clock, 49 minutes late. I took a deep breath and started driving toward the dinner, my heart racing with questions I didn't know how to answer yet. I kept checking the time on my phone, my heart pounding harder with every minute that passed, because by now I was officially late, and not just fashionably late. No, this was the kind of late that makes people angry, that makes them feel disrespected, and I knew that because these weren't just any people waiting for me, they were my in-laws. And not just any in-laws either, but the kind of rich, refined, powerful people who expect the world to work on their schedule, not the other way around. And here I was, standing on the side of the road with greasy hands and a nervous smile next to a broken-down car that belonged to a stranger who was currently rummaging through her trunk looking for something that might not even exist. I could feel the tension crawling up my spine like ice water. How do you explain this kind of delay to people who already think you're not good enough for their daughter? How do you justify showing up with oil stains on your shirt when you were supposed to arrive polished, respectful, and on time? I imagine the look on their faces, imagine the sighs, the tight, polite smiles, the judgment buried under layers of passive aggression and expensive cologne, and every second ticked louder like a warning bell. The woman whose car I was fixing was sweet, she really was. She kept thanking me over and over again, calling me a blessing from the heavens, and saying things like they just don't make young men like you anymore. But the more she praised me, the more guilty I felt, not because I was helping her, but because I couldn't focus on her words. I was too distracted by the invisible weight of expectations pressing down on me. I kept turning the wrench, tightening bolts, checking cables, praying that something would click into place, that the engine would roar back to life. So I could be on my way, so I could rush back into my reality and face the consequences of my choice. Because, yes, I had made a choice. I had chosen to stop. I had chosen to help someone in need over impressing people who barely knew me and might never truly accept me. And that decision now hung in the air like a question waiting to be answered. Then it happened, a flicker of hope. The engine coughed, sputtered once, twice, and then roared to life, and the old woman gasped like she'd just witnessed a miracle. Her eyes welled with tears as she hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." I smiled, tried to brush off the moment as nothing, just glad to help, but my mind was racing because now it was a race against the clock. I jumped into my car, started the engine, and sped off, the streets blurring past me, the city lights turning into streaks of color as I replayed in my head how I would explain myself, how I could somehow make them see that I wasn't irresponsible, that I wasn't lazy, that this delay was something more. The traffic lights mocked me, turning red at every intersection. The cars in front of me moved with the urgency of snails, and my phone kept buzzing with messages, none of which I dared to open, yet every buzz felt like a judgment, like a silent scream, asking, "Where are you?" I started imagining the worst scenarios. What if they decided to leave before I arrived? What if this was their final test, and I had failed? What if this was the story they would forever tell about me, the time I blew my chance with a family that could open doors, the kind of doors that never opened twice? But under all that fear, there was also something else, something stronger, a strange kind of calm buried deep under the anxiety, because I knew I had done the right thing, and that kind of knowledge doesn't erase the consequences, but it gives you strength to face them. When I finally pulled up to the restaurant, my hands still smelled like engine oil, my clothes were wrinkled from the seatbelt, my face shiny from sweat, and my heart thumping like a drum roll as I walked toward the table where they were sitting. Their eyes turned to me slowly, like a scene from a movie, and for a second everything stopped, the noise, the people, the movement, it all froze, and that's when I opened my mouth to speak. I could feel it building, the tension like a thick fog in the air, as I pulled up to the mansion driveway and saw them all standing, their arms crossed, jaws clenched, waiting for me. My wife's father with his polished shoes and cold eyes, my mother-in-law with her permanent frown, and the rest of the family, like statues carved from marble. They didn't say a word as I stepped out of the car, not even a hello, just silent judgment weighing down on my shoulders. I tried to explain, tried to tell them what happened about the old woman on the side of the road, how her car had broken down, and how I couldn't just leave her there. But before I could finish, my wife's father cut me off, his voice sharp like a blade. "So you expect us to believe you risked everything just to help some stranger?" he asked, as if kindness was a foreign language. I nodded. I didn't even try to defend myself with more words, because I could see it in their faces. They didn't want an explanation, they wanted submission. They wanted me to apologize for being the kind of man who stops to help, for being late to their perfect dinner. But I couldn't do that, not this time. I looked at my wife, searching her eyes for a sign, for something that told me I wasn't alone in this. But she looked down, avoiding my gaze, and in that moment my chest tightened with a sadness I didn't expect. She wasn't going to stand up for me, not here, not now. The silence stretched so long it felt like it might swallow us all, and then her father stepped forward, closing the distance between us, his face just inches from mine. He whispered coldly, "Do you know what you've done? You've embarrassed us in front of everyone. Our friends, our family are nothing but a disgrace." And just like that, something snapped inside me. I wasn't going to beg for their respect. I wasn't going to let their money or their status make me feel small. I took a step back and spoke calmly, but firmly. "I didn't come here to be part of a show. I came because I love your daughter. I came because I thought this family valued something deeper than appearances. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe all of this is just smoke and mirrors. You care more about punctuality than humanity, more about reputation than decency." My words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable, and for a second I saw something flicker in my wife's eyes. Maybe surprise, maybe regret, I don't know, but it gave me just enough strength to keep going. I told them about the old woman in detail, how she reminded me of my own mother, how she was scared and alone, and how helping her wasn't a decision, it was instinct. I didn't do it to prove anything, I did it because it was right. And if that makes me less in your eyes, then so be it, I said. And then her father laughed a short bitter sound and asked, do you think that makes you a hero? And I answered, no, it makes me human. And honestly, I'd rather be that than whatever it is you're pretending to be. That hit him. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he turned and walked back into the house, and the rest followed one by one without another word until only my wife and I stood there in the cold air. She finally looked at me, really looked at me, and whispered, I didn't know what to say. And I told her, you didn't have to say anything, you just had to believe in me. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away gently, not out of anger, but clarity. Something had shifted, and we both felt it. She asked, do you still want to come inside? And I said, not if it means losing myself in the process. She nodded slowly. And I knew she understood, because sometimes confrontation isn't about shouting or breaking things, it's about standing still while the storm rages around you, and refusing to be moved by it. It's about choosing who you are, and not letting anyone redefine it, no matter how rich, how powerful, how connected they may be. After that night, everything seemed lost, but what I didn't know was that the real turning point was yet to come the next day. As I tried to pick up the pieces of shame and disappointment, the phone rang. It was Andrew's mother, her voice a mixture of firmness and something I couldn't quite identify. She invited me to talk in person. I accepted with a heavy heart, thinking I was going to hear more criticism, or perhaps the final word. When I arrived at the mansion, I felt my stomach churn. The same house that had judged me now seemed even bigger and more imposing, but what I didn't expect was that when I entered, I found the lady from the road sitting there in the middle of the room. She looked at me with a smile that seemed to carry secrets and explained that she was Andrew's aunt, the real owner of much of the family fortune. She said she had decided to meet me in a different way, without protocols, without masks, just observing whether I was really the type to stop and help someone in need. She said that this test was to find out who I really was, because in that family, many people pretend to be what they are not, and that she had seen something in me, something rare and valuable. A heart that does not bow to social pressure, a character that cannot be bought by wealth or status. Andrew's mother looked me in the eye and admitted that maybe she had been too harsh, that she had judged too quickly, and that she was willing to try to understand who Andrew actually appeared in the middle of the conversation and apologized for what had happened. He said he had always believed in me and wanted me to be part of the family, not for money or appearances, but for who I am. At that moment, I felt a mixture of relief and disbelief, as if everything had been a cruel but necessary test to reveal the truth about me and about them. My aunt pulled me into a tight hug and said she was happy that I hadn't given up, that my kindness and courage had opened doors that even she didn't know existed. At that moment, everything changed for me. I was no longer that strange, backward girl. I was someone who had overcome a major challenge and emerged victorious. That moment in the grand living room felt like a scene from a movie, the kind where everything changes in one breath. The elderly woman who had seemed fragile and lost was now standing before me, not just as a stranger, but as the matriarch of the family, the one who held the real power and the wealth that everyone talked about but few truly understood. She smiled gently and said, Mary, when I asked you to stop on the road, I wasn't testing your knowledge of cars or your punctuality. I was testing your heart. She explained that in families like theirs with money and status, many people are looking for the perfect image, the perfect appearance, but that is not what truly matters to her. What matters is the kind of person you are underneath all the surface, how you treat others, especially when no one is watching. She told me that she had watched from a distance how I stopped without hesitation, how I cared without question, and how I chose kindness over convenience. And she said that in this world, that kind of person is rarer than gold. She looked around at her family, who now seemed humbled, and said, I wanted to see if Mary was someone who could withstand the pressure, the judgment, and still remain true to herself. I realized then that everything, the dinner, the judgment, the humiliation, was part of a test I had unknowingly passed. She said, Mary, you didn't just pass the test, you reminded us all what really matters in life. The family's lawyer nodded quietly and said that they had been wrong to judge me so quickly, and that wealth should never be a measure of a person's worth. The mother of Andrew stepped forward and with tears in her eyes apologized for doubting me. She said that she had been blinded by appearances and that she wanted me to know that I was accepted for who I am, not for what I have, but for the kindness and courage I showed. That day, the father of Andrew finally spoke, saying that he respected my honesty and that he hoped I would forgive their harshness. Andrew took my hand. looked into my eyes and said, "I've always believed in you, and I'm proud to call you my partner." And from that moment on, everything felt different. I felt like I belonged not because of money or status, but because I had proven something far more important: my integrity, my heart, and my strength. And as the room filled with a new kind of warmth and acceptance, I knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, not only for me, but for all of us. After that day, everything changed in ways I never imagined. The cold walls of the mansion started to feel less like a cage and more like a home. The people who once looked at me with suspicion began to smile genuinely and include me in conversations, not because I was expected to, but because they wanted to. I found myself invited to family events, not as an outsider, but as a part of something bigger. The old woman who had tested me became a friend, someone I could call aunt, and who shared stories of her own struggles and triumphs, reminding me that behind every fortune there are battles fought and won. Andrew and I grew even closer. We stopped hiding behind fears and started planning our future without hesitation. 1 month after everything, the way it all started, the night I was late because I helped a stranger. He proposed to me in the garden under the stars. I said yes with all my heart, because in that moment I realized that sometimes being late is exactly what life needs to set things right. And now when I think about that night on the road, when I saw that old woman struggling, I don't regret a single second. I know that the kindness I showed that day was the key that opened doors I didn't even know existed. And if you're watching this and wondering if it's worth stopping to help, if it's worth choosing kindness even when everything else is on the line, I want you to know that it is. It might not be easy, it might make you late, it might even cost you a lot, but the rewards are bigger than you can imagine. So tell me, what would you have done in my place? Would you have stopped or kept driving? I'd love to hear your story, so please comment below. And if you like this video, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and check out the next video on your screen right now. I promise you won't want to miss it. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. So here we are at the end of this story. I hope it made you think about those small moments when you have to choose between rushing through life or stopping to help someone in need. I'm Mary, and this story is just one example of how sometimes the hardest choices bring the biggest rewards. If you enjoyed hearing my story, please make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, because we have many more stories that will touch your heart and maybe change the way you see the world. And while you're here, there is another video appearing right now on your screen that I really think you will like. It's got twists, surprises, and more lessons about kindness and courage. So don't miss it. Click it, watch it, and come back to tell me what you thought. I love reading your comments and hearing your thoughts, because this community means everything to me. Remember, every like, every subscribe, every comment helps this channel grow and lets me keep bringing you stories that matter. So thank you so much for being here, for listening, and for being part of this journey. Until next time, take care, keep being kind, and I'll see you in the next video.